Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Curious Sports Pulse. This is the morning show. My name is Gabriel. Now, there's a lot to get to with Game 5, and right off the bat, I think it's bonkers. I think it's ridiculous that the Dallas Mavericks are actually 4.5 point favorites. It started off even worse. So that makes zero sense to me, but we'll get to that in a moment. Shout out to Pucks Across Borders. They are streaming right now as well. Oh, gonna give them a listen while we're here on the morning. Um, so I think that's fully ridiculous. The WNBA is in full swing. I don't care. I don't care what your view is on the WNBA or what's going on with Caitlin Clark. It's a fantastic product. I enjoy watching it. So we're gonna dive into some of what I saw last night, at least. But first, Juan Soto was, um, you know, catching interference, catching of a pop up fly, infield catch interference by second base. And Aaron Boone comes out to his defense and gets ejected. Awesome. Now, here's the thing is that more or less most or a lot of people are saying what's Juan Soto supposed to do, that it's unfair, and that it really wasn't something that avoidable, the contact. And I hear that argument. I do. Right, buddy? He sees it fly up it. Goodness, sorry. Buddy sees a fly up in the air. He takes a step and a half forward that he shouldn't, then has to retract, and essentially he's covering up second base. So I 100% agree and fully understand the notion of, well, what's Soto supposed to do in that situation? However, we saw a similar play not too long ago. And especially with everything going on with MLB umpiring, with umping, what they are more or less saying now is the onus is on you as a base runner to get out of the way no matter what. And that unless it's clear that the contact initially begins and is intentional from the fielder, then you're at fault. Or from, yeah. So the MLB is making it clear right now that if you are the base runner, you have to do like you have to dig a trench, you have to disappear, you have to bilocate, whatever it is you have to do, it's on you to avoid contact. And again, forget about what the letter of the law is, forget about what the spirit of the rules are, forget about what's been called in the past. This is what they're saying for right now. Could it change? Yeah, should it probably change? I think so. But either way, this is what they're saying for right now, that this is how they're going to officiate this particular play that we've now seen twice, ending controversy over the past 2 weeks. But more importantly, this has less to do with that play specifically. And again, do I think it's unfair of Juan Soto, and do I love how Aaron Boone comes out to rush to his defense of his players? Yeah, love that. So, but this is less about that, and then of course with all the talk of Juan Soto, um, you know, looking like he might want to extend, might want to extend. So there's that aspect to all this, but more importantly, this should serve as something of a warning shot to everyone who was happy, to everyone who was thrilled, to everyone who was overjoyed with the departure of Angel Hernandez. Now, hear me out. We get it that Angel Hernandez not exactly beloved in too many circles. And he retires. He gives this long spiel of, "Oh, it's been everything I've dedicated to the game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." Awesome. But more importantly, this just goes to show how no one's ever going to be happy in officiating. No one is ever right. There are some jobs in life where that's just the case of it. Even when you do a good job, you're not going to receive recognition. And they know that going into it. So do they do they some days maybe come in with a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder and have a little less patience, a little less tolerance for certain body language or for someone saying something a certain way, whatever? Very possible. Very possible. But what you have to realize when you were the one who is cheering for Angel Hernandez's retirement, and that's valid. That's 100% valid, especially with his history specifically. But nothing's solved. Nothing's changed. Why? Because it's a unending revolving door of umpires who are pretty protected. So we're seeing this now. We're seeing this with we'll continue to see this with future calls. And this isn't something that's going away to the level of what we'd hope to see any drastic improvement. That's not coming anytime soon. Right? These are judgment calls in the moment. And we all know that the MLB is going to be more than willing, more than happy, and almost rush to the defense of their empires. Freudian slip, but either way, the point still stands, right? So this is kind of where I'm coming from. At least this is how I'm viewing it. Nothing right now, for now, the immediacy, nothing's going to be fixed in terms of that. And so, if anything is going to change, it needs to start through the umpire union. But in the immediate future, in the immediate now, I guess that would be the present, right? You, as a base runner, need to be aware of this new emphasis that they are making very clear is how they're going to officiate this specifically. So the first time it's kind of like, well, we couldn't see that coming. Twice it's, well, okay, that's similar to the last time, but still it's kind of unfair. Now, if it happens again and it's called the same way, now there's not really an excuse. We all know that this is what they want, this is what they're looking for, and this is what the call will be if and when there's a similar situation. So are they maybe prepping for how they want something like this to be come the postseason? Possibly. I don't know. And again, could there be a clarification for a little further down the road? Yeah, sure. But overall, I think that this is something that not to be expected, but something that we should have seen and something that is more or less predictable now with how everything's unfolded, with how the relationships have been across all sports, really, but in particular with the MLB. Moving on. Asia Wilson and the Las Vegas Aces. I mean, she was simply spectacular last night. She creates a mismatch down low that is impossible for others to keep up with. And I'm watching this game against the Minnesota Lynx, and it was close. It was close in the third. I think they got it down to 2 or 3 points. But it was a game that for a minute looked like it could have gone either way. So to me shows two things. First of all, two teams with a winning record at the moment, two teams that look decent, that look good. So and a lot of Las Vegas Aces to be, the best team in the WNBA, and that's accurate. But to me, this shows that the margins at this moment, it's pretty close in terms of the totality of top to bottom. So just because you play the Las Vegas Aces, the Minnesota Lynx nearly caught them on an off night. Las Vegas Aces went through something of a turnover fest there. A little careless with the basketball in the third. Lynx got hot from shooting. This was a game that they could have had. Now I know they ended up pulling away, and it ended up being a 14-point game victory for the Aces. Fine, but this was easily a game that they could have had. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter too much. Why? Because they have Asia Wilson and her size, what she's able to do, how she's able to disrupt on both ends. That's something that you can't coach. That's something that you can't make up for. So you'll always have that mismatch. And then Kelsey Plum actually, in my opinion, had something of an off night overall. 4 of 14 shooting, 2 of 8 from 3 with 5 turnovers. Still brought the intensity, still played 36 minutes, but overall, something of an off night for her, which is still better than the average player. But right, that just more so speaks to the point. Asia Wilson and Kelsey Plum aren't always going to be spectacular on the same night. So this is a team that can be had at times. And then give a final shout out to Kate Martin. She comes in. She finishes 3 of 8 from the field, 3 of 6 from range, but the timing of her threes, the timing of her threes proved critical when it looked like the Lynx were about to make this close again. So shout out to Kate Martin, someone who on the Iowa team was seen as someone who was at, and this wasn't my narrative, but this is right. It was always Caitlin Clark and the others. She has no help. Kate Martin proving to be a more than capable pro scorer and 3-point specialist. A couple hustle plays down at the other end too. So I'm not saying anything other than that at the moment, but someone to continue to keep an eye out for. And Becky Hammond, trust her. I mean, Kate Martin played 21 minutes. So shout out to her. Now, on the other side of things, I want to touch on the Phoenix Mercury and New York Liberty. New York Liberty, they're a team that, they're 5-2 now. But I mean, they're easily a team that could have been 4-3, like fighting for 500. Are they going to be fine? Most likely, yes. But a little bit, and again, set aside the wins and losses for a moment. Just how they've played and how some of the games have played out. Little bit of a slow start for me. But again, I think they're mostly going to be fine. Um, but that's not really what I want to focus on here. So instead, I want to go to the other side with Natasha Cloud. She said something really interesting to me. She was speaking of the sisterhood, and I forget if this was last night or a couple days ago. Sorry, some of the press conferences, some of the interviews were together in my head. I think it was last night, but either way, the point will still stand. She spoke on the sisterhood of the WNBA and how everyone who makes it to the league has the utmost respect and they support each other. And how it is like a sisterhood, a sorority almost. A sorority fraternity feel. Like it's for life, we support you kind of thing. She goes on to clarify and elaborate, but anytime you step on the court, all bets are off. Any potential friendship, any respect goes out the window, right? We're here to compete. And so she was saying that specifically about Brianna Stewart on the other side. But I think this is fair. I don't, and again, this is off the top of my memory. So if I'm wrong, someone correct me, please. But off the top of my head, I don't think she directly said Caitlin Clark, but it seemed like she more or less heavily implied it. And maybe it wasn't directly for Caitlin Clark, again, big rookie class, but she more or less was saying, I don't care who you are. If we're stepping on the same court together and we're opponents, you're going to get it. You're going to get my full effort every time. And if I have to knock you down, if I have to occasionally try to get away with something that is a foul or within the gamesmanship or just me competing, I'm going to do it because that's my job at this point. Super grateful for all the progress that other players have brought and that other players continue to bring for the league itself. And I mostly agree with that, right? It does. Let's pretend, and this is what I think some people were hoping for almost. Let's pretend that anytime Caitlin Clark stepped on the court, that people would just stop playing defense and that they would just let her shoot, and Caitlin Clark would have to go out, have to just go out, and she would get 30 points a night easily. That would diminish her actual 30-point night the other day that she clearly earned, she fought for. And it was spectacular, it was amazing. We're all saying, "Wow, so she can do this at the next level too." So, what Natasha Cloud said is entirely appropriate and spot on. So this notion that some had, and I see this, for example, on the Twitter sphere, where there'll be a clip of Caitlin Clark getting a hard foul, and then someone saying, "Look at them ruining the money train." Well, that's you don't enhance the money train, you don't continue the money train if it's very clear that this is all a facade, and if it's very clear that Caitlin Clark isn't having to earn it. Right? That would be so obvious. That would be apparent. And that would lack any competition, which is why we tune into sports in the first place, at the pro level, at least. So I have no problem with what Natasha Cloud said. I think it's 100% accurate, and this if for anyone who is wondering why some of the narratives, why there's been some quote unquote bitterness, it's not that. Natasha Cloud hit it exactly on the head. This is what she's talking about. This is a reasonable way where you can both appreciate all the greatness that Caitlin Clark is bringing and understand why some players are speaking and acting the way they are when asked about her. And then once and for all, although this probably won't be once and for all, but a slightly different note, people crediting Caitlin Clark with bringing charter planes, charter flight to the WNBA, that's just inaccurate. 100% inaccurate. And this is also part of what other players are. So you can appreciate Caitlin Clark's greatness. You can appreciate that she is 100% moving the needle, swinging the pendulum in a positive direction with more force. You can say that. That's accurate. But then don't go overboard and give her credit for stuff that she had zero impact on. So charter flights were always a part of the plan, and they've been a part of all the postseasons of the past 2 years. I believe it's definitely they were last year. I believe it was the past 2 years. So correct me there if I'm wrong. And this is something that was actually fundamentally in the plan. So if your notion, if your mentality is that this is something that they've just been kicking down the road, well, not really. Right, the owners have been pushing for this. The only issue that they've been quote unquote kicking down the road is who would pay for it. Some owners were more than willing to pay for it right away. Other owners weren't. And so that's where the issue came from. So then, because that would create the competitive imbalance. Now, what could be fair to say is that the timeline was sped up because of Caitlin Clark, but I think we're also seeing it was also because of Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, maybe to a lesser extent. But right, this is exactly why players in the WNBA are upset with some of the narratives going out there. A lot of players came before her to set the foundation. A lot of players continue to pave the way for the WNBA. It's not just one player. Caitlin Clark is spectacular. She is moving the needle, yes, but she's being overcredited, and some are expecting other WNBA players to just let her score almost. That's a completely unfair, completely silly narrative to have. And so exactly how Natasha Cloud phrased it is spot on. Finally, game 5 is tonight between the Dallas Mavericks and Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, I was on record of saying that I would have been shocked that the T-Wolves win a game, and I would have been I was in favor. I was 100% a supporter of the T-Wolves uh, getting swept. But again, the path to victory for the Minnesota Timberwolves is Anthony Edwards needs to be spectacular. Duh. And Gobert and or Karl-Anthony Towns needs to have a good to great night on offense for this Minnesota Timberwolves team. Of course, you would love some bench production, and most would point at Naz Reid. However, it's not really reasonable, and it shouldn't be who you pin your hopes on for a bench producer on these two teams specifically right now in the playoffs to carry you to a game 5 win. Now, could it happen? Could someone come out of their proverbial shell and almost shock you? Sure, I guess. But not too likely at this point. Instead, we kind of know who the main suspects are. We kind of know who to expect, and we kind of know who to be on the lookout for. So, for all intents and purposes, this is going to be between Minnesota's Big 3 and Dallas's Big 2. Which star, I would say tandem, but I'm pretty sure tandem is reserved for 2 typically, hence the word tandem. But which collection of stars, either on the Timberwolves side or the tandem on the Dallas side. And yes, I am laughing at my own silly, I don't want to call it joke, but you know what I mean. Who's going to prevail? And I don't see a possibility. I don't see a scenario where Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic play and shoot as poorly as they did a second time. Could either one of and by that I mean I want to clarify. I think either one of them could also have another off night shooting, but I expect Doncic or Irving to have a much more efficient night and to have 25 plus points tonight. And despite them not having the greatest of offensive nights, being being inefficient, let's call it what it is, in game 4, it was still a game at the end. So I really don't see how. I just really don't see how. Pardon me. How Dallas doesn't come back. And as we all know, they even played really bad in the first 2 games specifically. Now, was it, and I mean comparatively for a playoff performance from stars that you would expect. but in terms of that, they played really bad. So, want to clarify that last statement. Want to clarify that last comment. So we all know what the path to victory for the Minnesota Timberwolves is. I've belabored that point enough. But a lot has to go right for the Timberwolves, and a lot has to go wrong on the Dallas Mavericks side for this to not be at least a close game. So the Timberwolves being favored to win by 4.5, and it started, I believe, at 5.5 points, is complete ludicrousy to me. This will likely be a close game. Now, if the Timberwolves end up winning, could free throws end up determining? Could free throws end up pushing the spread? Sure. Or the ultimate margin of victory? Sure. But by and large, if you had to pick one of these scenarios, Mavericks win comfortably, it's a close game, or Timberwolves win comfortably, I think we all would pick a close game. Now, I've let it be known I'm leaning toward the Mavericks just winning. So if I had to pick the Timberwolves getting a blowout win or the Mavericks getting a blowout win, if I'm left with those two choices, then I'm obviously siding with the Mavericks. And again, mainly because I don't see them being that inefficient again, particularly from three. And I'm a big advocate. If you've listened to the show before, I'm a huge advocate of watching, just in general, anyone put pressure on the interior of the defense, collapse the paint. But either way, the point still stands. I view this more as a chance. I view it much more likely that the Mavericks would win in a blowout than the T-Wolves winning in a blowout. Let's get that out of the way. But either way, the most realistic possibility, the most realistic and probable outcome is that this will just be a close game. So for sure, taking Mavericks plus 4.5. In other words, they can lose by 4.5 or less, fewer points, and you still get money. I think that's the smart move. And I wouldn't be afraid of just saying I'm saying the Dallas Mavericks are going to win game 5 tonight. That's how I view it. That's what I see. But let me know in the comments what you think. Tune in 4 p.m. to provide the spark. And check us out, CuriousSportsPulse.com. And on the Twitter, we are SportsPulse100 on Kick, and on Twitch, we are also Curious